Chapter 4, Fair Housing. In this chapter, you're going to be able to identify protections of the federal fair housing laws, including enforcement. We're going to describe the protections of the New Jersey laws against discrimination, including state regulations on rentals. And we're going to discuss the implications of the fair housing laws for brokers and salespeople. So let's start off with equal opportunity in housing. There's federal, state, and local laws about human rights and fair housing that affects rentals and sales at every phase of the real estate transaction, from listing to close. Failure to comply with fair housing practice is not only grounds for loss of your license, but it's also an unlawful act. Now, here's a little tip I threw down at the bottom for you. When two laws cover the same topic, whether it's discrimination or if it's something else, it doesn't matter. Anytime you have two laws that cover the same topic, which law do you follow? The more restrictive rule. You always follow the more restrictive rule. Doesn't matter if it's a zoning law or if it's a law about discrimination or if it's any kind of a law. When two laws cover the same topic, we follow the more restrictive law.
Right.
Okay? The more restrictive rule will always prevail.
Mhm.
All right. So, why do we have fair housing laws? Well, so that everyone can have an equal rights and opportunity to have a place to live, whether they own or rent. Doesn't guarantee everybody has a right to own. There's no right for you to have ownership in real estate. There's a right for you to have an opportunity to buy real estate. But there's no law that guarantees the outcome. Look, these last couple of years, with all these different protests and all kinds of stuff you see going out there in the public, people are talking about what is it? Diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Equity. It's not equality. What is equity?
Equity is like
It's trying to guarantee that everybody has the same outcome. How do you guarantee everybody has the same outcome if everybody doesn't as hard to get it?
you can't.
You can't. This is why you got a lot of people talking out against the DEI stuff. You get people that say, you know what DEI stands for? Didn't earn it. People are given. I understand the reasons that people may have for wanting to push this stuff, but really, if you really look back, you should not get an advantage or a disadvantage because of who you are, your religion, your skin color, or any of that, right? But we all should have the same opportunity to achieve the same goals if we all work hard enough to reach them. There's no guarantee to your outcome, right? So why do we have equal rights and opportunity? This is what fair housing laws put in place for. So everybody has an equal right for the opportunity for home ownership or home rental. Okay? Are you guaranteed a house?
No.
No. Nobody's guaranteed a house. We got homeless people. They could be homeless because they don't work or they got no money. There's various reasons. I'm not going to get into why people get homeless, but you get people who are homeless, they just got mental issues, and I'm going to get into all that. But these topics, obviously they're more than simple explanations, but we're going to try to stick to simple explanations for some of these things so that we just have an understanding of what we need to know for exams here. Okay, so why do we have fair housing laws? So that everybody has an equal right for the opportunity to have a house, whether they own it or rent it,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to own personal property. You have an equal right. Everybody has an equal right to own the clothes on their backs, right?
Yes.
I mean, there was a point in time when that wasn't the case. You had slavery, right? Slaves were considered property. The clothes that they wore wasn't theirs. It was their slave masters, right? So, but since there a lot of stuff happened in this country over the years, we had things that happened hundreds of years ago, that started working towards equality. Okay, these things don't happen overnight. Okay, so if you violate any of these laws, it is a criminal act. So let's start off with one of the oldest laws, the one that was first passed in 1866 that tried to give people equal rights and opportunities. Okay, and let me read it off. Okay, the efforts of the federal government to guarantee equal housing opportunities to all U.S. citizens began with the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. This law was an outgrowth of the 14th Amendment that prohibits any type of discrimination based on race and color. It says that all citizens of the United States shall have the same right in every state and territory as is enjoyed by white citizens thereof to inherit, purchase, lease, sell, hold, and convey real and personal property, like the clothes on your back, your car, your jewelry. You're allowed to have things, right? Because of the reference to white citizens, this law has been widely interpreted to prohibit discrimination based on race and color. And in 1968, we had another whole civil rights movement then. The Supreme Court decision of Jones versus Alfred H. Mayer Company. See, in previous versions of the book, they discussed what this case was about. Jones was an African American, and he tried to, I forget if it was trying to buy a house or rent a house or whatever it was. And then you had the Alfred H. Mayer Company that owned the property. And because of the whole Civil Rights Act of 1968 of fair housing, pertaining to housing, it did create some exceptions to the law. But those exceptions did not give a green light. There's reasons for exceptions being in the law, but they're not a green light for people to go ahead and discriminate. Because remember, I told you when two laws cover the same topic, the more restrictive rule will always prevail. And even though the civil rights in the Fair Housing Act of 1968, part of that civil rights that deal with real estate, even though there was exceptions to the law, when it comes to race, there are never exceptions to the law when it comes to race or color, because you always fall back on the more restrictive rule, which is the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which prohibits any discrimination based on race or color. So even though another law may have exceptions carved out for a specific reason, that doesn't give you the green light to discriminate against people because of their race or color. Because you fall back on the other law that covers race and color, and it says under no circumstances can you do that. And that was back from 1866. So it's really precious these days when I hear people trying to say, when they don't agree with laws, and they're like, well, that's an old law. Yeah, what, you don't like old laws? What's wrong with old laws? You know that old laws prevent people from discriminating based on race and color. That one back from the 1800s, right? What, you don't want to follow old, you don't like old laws? How about you just follow the law? Old or new, you follow the law, right? So the old law from 1866, that's an old law. That prohibits discrimination based on race and color. Now, later on, they also added some more protected classes under the 1866 law. We'll get into that in just a moment. But this case of the Alfred H. Mayer Company, he had a property for sale, but he figured that, well, I did not hire a real estate agent, and I did not. So he started quoting some of the exceptions to the law, thinking that he could discriminate because he didn't hire a real estate agent and he did not advertise in a discriminatory way, that he was able to discriminate against somebody because they were black. Okay. Well, this case went to the Supreme Court, And the Supreme Court just affirmed the Civil Rights Act of 1866, that old law that prohibits all racial discrimination in private and public and in the sale or rental of real property. So the law says that there are no exceptions when race or color is involved.
Mm.
So what is the protected class under the Civil Rights Act of 1866?
Race, discrimination of race and color.
Race and color. Are there any exceptions to race and color?
No.
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 Okay. You guys got everything that you need to highlight here?
Give me a second.
Wait, I get the last one. There's no exception.
On page 68, by the way. I'm sorry. I didn't have the page
That's
number.
okay.
We put
That's
a-
okay. We got it. And when two laws covers the same topic, listed. Okay.
All right. Everybody good?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, to recap, we have the Civil Rights Act of 1866. It's a part of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. It's granting equal rights to all citizens for ownership of both real and personal property. That's all property. There's only two kinds of property on this planet. It's either real estate or it's personal. That's the only kind of property that we have, real or personal. When I say real, I'm talking about real estate.
Mhm.
Okay, so the Civil Rights Act of 1866 covers all kinds of property, both real and personal.
What is
And-
real means?
Real estate. It's short for
Real
real
estate.
estate.
Oh yeah.
Real and personal.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
And when
Thanks.
it comes to race, there are no exceptions to this federal law. See, this is my slide where I condensed all the definitions with easy to understand explanations. Good to study from. Okay.
Mhm.
So all types of property are covered by this law. All real estate, both residential and commercial, that includes unimproved raw land that has not been built on. And personal property, like the clothes on your back and your personal belongings. Now, the protected classes are race and color. But later on in 1987, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 was amended to also include ethnic groups and religious groups, your ethnicity and your religion. But for exams, you need to know race or color, okay, as the protected class. I don't think they'll even bring up ethnicity or religious groups. So enforcement for the real estate provision anyway, because, Civil Rights Act of 1866 covers everything, So as far as real estate goes, who enforces the federal anti-discriminatory laws, which this is, a federal law? It's enforced by HUD. That's the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Violations under the Civil Rights Act of 1866 must be heard in federal court, and the statute of limitations is determined by whatever the state law is. Federal court has no monetary caps on awards and settlements, though. So if you ever discriminate on somebody based on their race or color or ethnicity or religious groups, and you're filing that the violation was under the Civil Rights Act of 1866, it needs to be heard in federal court, and there's no limitations on the fines or penalties, or actually monetary awards and settlements. Fines, there are limitations, and they're wacky numbers, so you do not need to memorize them. But we will see what they are in this chat. We'll see it in a couple of slides from now. Okay. Everybody got this slide? Good slide? It's not a picture of maybe?
Hold on. snip.
Get your snippet tool.
Yeah. Okay, I did it.
Oh, this is about to be confusing.
Just let me know when everybody's got it so I could switch the slide.
I got it.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
So the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968. Oh, let's stop right there. Look at the title. There's a word in the title. What kind of property does the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 cover?
Housing.
Housing. So what kind of, so real estate you're saying, right? What kind of real estate?
Fair.
Well, there's, you got different kinds of real estate. You've got
Residential.
residential, you got commercial, right?
Yeah, so this is gonna be residential.
Residential, because houses, residential. So by using a little, process of a little deduction of reasoning there, we could figure out already what this law is going to cover, what kind of property it's going to cover.
Yep.
Residential real estate.
And commercial, okay.
No, not commercial.
Just yeah.
This one,
Just residential.
housing is not commercial. Housing
No,
is,
right. Residential.
so Fair Housing Act of 1968 only deals with residential properties,
Residential property, yeah.
right?
So,
So, question. So, the law doesn't protect commercial?
There's different laws. for
Oh,
that.
different law. Oh,
Yes,
different law.
laws,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I'm not just asking.
I mean, we had that whole federal, that Fair Civil Rights Act movement of 1968. And part of that Civil Rights Act movement of 1968, it covered a lot of different topics. Everything from, having segregated bathrooms and segregated schools and segregated water fountains and, having to ride on the back of the bus or whatever, This law, this body of laws covered all kinds of civil rights within it. Now, there was a section, that section, Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, covered housing. So Title 8 is also referred to as the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968. These are not different laws. It's the same law. You got the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which is a whole body of laws that were passed. There was a section of it, Title 8, that dealt with real estate, residential real estate, which they also named the Fair Housing Act of 1968.
That's what's going to confuse. One is 1866 and one is 1968.
You don't need to memorize the date on it. Just remember the old one, the one from the 1800s. That's the one that covers race and color and has no exceptions to it and covers all property.
And the
Okay.
federal housing covers all the civil action under housing.
Fair Housing Act of 1968, well, that covers only residential housing, and it does have some exceptions to the law. But because this law has some exceptions to it, remember, we always fall back on the Civil Rights Act of 1866. There are no exceptions when it comes to race or color. So even though this law has some exceptions to it, it does not mean you could discriminate on somebody because of their race or color. Because we fall back on the more restrictive law, 1866. Here, another thing to remember this is, back in 1866, who was the president back then that did some major legislation towards trying to do away with slavery and dealing with giving everybody equal rights?
Lincoln.
Lincoln, right? That's
Yeah.
what he fought for, right? The Emancipation Proclamation, right? Now, obviously, it did not instantly make everybody equal rights for everybody. You still had your hardcore racist and slave people who wanted slavery and all that. It takes time for people to change. So I've had these classes where I started teaching them, and before I got past the second sentence, I got people saying, "Well, it says that all citizens have the rights to property, and they start saying, but you didn't bring up the fact, though, that the Constitution, when it was passed, black people were considered 2/3 of a person or 1/3 of a person or something like that. I forget what it was. And I'm like, okay, well, you don't know history that good, but you know a little bit of history, and it could be a dangerous thing. If you don't have the full knowledge of what you're talking about, but you're going to talk like you're an authority on it. Anybody ever watch those series? I highly suggest you do. They have them on History Channel and on the Fox Business Channel about, you have those ones about Titans of Industry, the men who made America. But then you also have another one that's about history, and it's taught about the Constitution and how we became a country. I forget the title of it. It's narrated by Kelsey Grammer. They talk about how we formed as a nation. And when they were trying to write the first Constitution, the draft of the Constitution, you had your southern states that wanted slavery still and your northern states that didn't, and a compromise. But it was insisted upon that black people would still be considered for voting privileges. Now, this was because the northern states knew that they could trick the southern states that were pro-slavery into this by saying, hey, listen, the slaves are your property, and if they're your property, if we give them voting rights so that they could be considered people, even if it's 1/3 of a person or 1/8 of a person, or whatever the fraction was, they're still considered people now. And now we got you, because nobody can be considered a partial person. So we do that by passing this law and then considering these people as people, that later on this could be used as the basis to change the laws and to truly get freedom and equal rights for people down the road. Knowing that this stuff doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. It takes time. So this is what they agreed to in the Constitution. So later on, by the time we got to the 1800s, the Emancipation Proclamation, we had showed that everybody by then, this was way after the Constitution, 1776 we're talking about. Now it's 1866. We're talking about almost 100 years later now, right? Now we're giving equal rights, and that people are considered no longer a person or whatever. You are now you are now legally considered, because everybody, you can't have 1/3 of a person. You're a person. You have equal rights as enjoyed by white citizens thereof. So these are the steps that truly made some major leaps in progress. I know people still argue today and make the arguments today about slavery and reparations and all that stuff. But you name to me one other country in the world that promotes freedom and equal rights as much as the United States does. There's not a country in the world that promotes it as much as the United States. Are we perfect? No, nobody's perfect, right? But we work towards these things over time. Anyway, spending too much time on that. Anyway, that's a great series you guys could watch too. I could tell you what it is. Let me look it up really quick. Here we go. I pulled it up by looking up the names of another movie that I knew that I have here. In that ClassLinks Word document, I also have a list of movies, shows, documentaries that are real estate related or that I may mention in passing in this class. We had that Men Who Built America, Titans of Industry TV series. That's on History Channel. Then we have American Dynasty, which also talks about those. It's very similar. I think it's just a rebranded version. It's on a different network. And then we have, see, The Men Who Built America. That's the same one. The Cartel, Big Short, Money Pit. You know, I don't have that documentary here. It's to talk about the history of our country. You know what? I'm going to add it. I'm going to look it up. I'm going to find out what it is, and I'm going to add it here to this list, guys. I'm going to add it to this list later on. I'm not going to waste your time right now. I know I can look it up and find it, but let's finish this class, and then I'll look it up, and then we'll get. I will get back to you on the name of that series. It's a series about the history of our country. I know it's always on the Fox Business Channel. It's on cable, the cable one, Fox Business Channel, not their news channel. And it's narrated by, it's about American history. Okay. It's narrated by him explaining what's actually going on and with reenactments and stuff. And it's pretty cool if you're into that kind of stuff. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a nerd like that.
No, I love history.
Yeah, it's great. All right. Okay. So, once again, my notes on the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968. It's part of the Civil Rights Act of the 1968 and has a section dedicated to housing called Title 8. See, this is a more forward explanation instead of just referring to Civil Rights Act of 1968, Title 8, the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968. If I just mention those things, sounds like three different laws. In fact, it's all just one. Explaining one. So, the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 does have some exceptions to it. Types of properties that are covered under it are residential property, whether it's for sale or lease or transfer, including vacant land for residential use. The protected classes are race, color, religion, national origin. In 1974, amendments added sex as a protected class, which was basically for rights for women.
Never knew that.
Term sex has the meaning of sex, though, in the laws has changed a lot. A lot of times now it's dealing with sexual identities of people, sexual preferences, gender identity and expression and all that. So it's been changed a lot. It was originally, sex was intended to put laws in place to protect women, to give women equal rights. Because, if you go out and try to get a car loan to buy a car or to buy your own house and say maybe you were a divorced or a single woman, they would look down upon you. They'd feel, oh yeah, little lady, why don't you and get your husband to come and the men can discuss these issues. It's very degrading, So they passed these laws to protect women and to give women the rights to vote and all those other things, So that's what's sex in 1974. So people with disabilities, including AIDS and familial status, they were added in 1988 as a protected class, as well as alcoholics and persons in treatment programs. They are considered a protected class. Now, they've got this wording like this, and people try to use this wording to say that you're a protected class if you are a drug user, but you're seeking help. Not just if you're just outright a drug abuser, or an alcoholic. An alcoholic, for some reason, it doesn't matter if you're in a treatment program, but drug users, you have to be in a treatment program to be considered a protected class. So current drug abusers and people who pose a threat to the health and safety of others, they are not considered a protected class. Now, in New Jersey, we got our own laws. We didn't get into any of the New Jersey laws yet. And newer New Jersey laws have been crafted, actually some on the federal basis too, but they're not as explicit as New Jersey's, that actually could make drug users and drug abusers and ex-convicts a protected class. So enforcement of the Federal Fair Housing Act is also done by HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, in which you have 1 year to file a complaint to have it heard by an administrative judge within HUD. HUD has its own court systems. All they do is listen to discrimination court cases, so the judges, they're very fine-tuned and adapt and aware of the different types of discrimination. And so you have a year to file a complaint and have it heard in front of an administrative judge within HUD itself. Or 2 years if you want to make a federal case out of it and have it heard in federal court. In which case, in federal court, there's no monetary caps on awards and judgments. So, here are the Fair Housing Act prohibits these following discriminatory acts. Let's just highlight them because I created a next slide with the same stuff in there in the list, except I gave my own explanations, which kind of like expanded upon it a little bit with the explanation. So just go down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go down to the 5th bullet point and highlight race, color, religion, national origin, disability, and familial status. You can also add in there sex, because sex has been added now later in 1974. This was the Fair Housing Act of 1968. 1974, they added sex. And then also write blockbusting and panic peddling. Blockbusting / panic peddling. Blockbusting is also known as panic peddling. This is illegal under this federal law.
What is blockbusting?
I'll be getting to it in a moment. I'll give you a brief explanation before we get to it, just because you asked right now, and I know we're not going to have time to get to it before this class ends, so I'll answer your question here. But before I do, on the next bullet point, at the end of the line, write redlining.
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 Yeah.
Redlining. Okay.
It's one word. REDLINING. Redlining.
After discrimination.
So to answer your question, what is blockbusting? Well, it could also be called panic peddling. So it's making a profit by inducing owners of housing to sell or rent because of the prospective entry into the neighborhood of people of a protected class. So basically, you're selling panic. You're trying to scare homeowners. These people are moving in the area. They're going to run down your neighborhood. You're going to have drugs and issues, or you're going to have all kinds of people of this race or this religion or whatever story that you want to make up that's scary. You create and you try to spread your panic to try to force that homeowner or induce them into wanting to sell. Trying to get them to bust up the block. That's what I call blockbusting. You're trying to get people to sell their homes by telling them a scary story about these people moving in, trying to get them to bust up the block and sell their house to you. You're going to be their savior. And then after you get it, you probably turn around and you sell it to the very protected class that you're telling those scary stories about. And you sell it to them at a marked up price. Okay. So these are nothing but opportunists that are using some fear mongering to try to get people to sell. And then they try to get it at a cheaper price. And then they turn around and try to sell it to the very protected class that they were fear mongering about at a higher price. And then they go knock on the neighbor's door. You see who moved in next door? You know, and they continue with the panic selling. Now, I've seen documentaries on this where you'd have these guys, they'd go knocking on people's houses. And this was in the 60s. They'd go knocking on people's houses. They may even pay a young black girl or a Hispanic girl who's pushing a stroller down the street while they're knocking on the door and talking to people these people are moving to the neighborhood. They're going to run down your neighborhood. Look, you know, spread this fear and panic, trying to scare people into selling their homes. That's blockbusting, also known as panic peddling, and it's illegal under federal law. Go ahead. What's up?
I have a question.
Sure.
And I witnessed myself, and I don't understand it. So there's a town in New Jersey that a religious group goes around and knocking on everybody's door, offering a high offer to sell their property. And some people are selling their property so they can get it and move in their religion, and some people are refusing. Is that legal or illegal? Because they're in the township now complaining.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me rephrase that, what you just said. Is it illegal to knock on somebody's door and offer them a lot of money for their home?
Yes.
The religion is irrelevant. Is it illegal for somebody to knock on your door and offer you a lot of money for your house?
Mm-hmm. No, I guess that can't be.
No. Yeah. So basically that's what it is. People just start getting mad when it's like they're taking over the whole area. They're buying up everywhere, you know. And you get a lot of this because this often happens with communities that like to stick together. Like you get the Hasidic Jewish community. I know that's happening in my neighborhood right now, you know.
Okay, so yeah, that's what I was talking about, because I'm like, it's happening.
I look at them as
my aunt is one of the victims, and they're just keep constantly. She's like, no, I'm not selling our house, but they 3 people from the block sold their house, and she's like the only one left, and they keep harassing her to try to get her house. What can she do about that?
oh, she could just put up a no soliciting sign, you know, unless your town has a no knock ordinance or anything. But then again, they're not a business; they're just an individual offering to buy the house. You could just tell them no soliciting. I'm not selling my house. Put that sign on your door. You know, but don't ask. You know, but you know there are some upsides to it. Yeah, they're like a neighborhood watch. You know, because if you notice, Hasidic Jews, they walk a lot. And, you know, they're like always walking around the neighborhood. I think the neighborhood's even safer now since they started moving it, because they're walking all days of the and night, you know, getting their exercise in, you know, because the body's the temple. You got to take care of your body and all that. You know, and I consider them a neighborhood watch. I think it's a good thing, you know. The other good thing I like about them is that they're driving up the value of my home, and they didn't do one thing to it.
Oh, that's a good thing for you.
You know? So whatever it is that I'm ready to sell, I know I could get a lot of money for it, especially since they're buying a lot of houses immediately in my immediate vicinity. You know, so they're always walking by. You can see they're always like stalking my house. They're always like watching it. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I know what they want to do. They want to check it out, and I'm on one of those desirable streets for them too. So I know what the deal is. So what? They want to buy the house. So would it matter if they were all Muslims?
I mean, just any set, like, are you allowed to do it? But as long as you're offering the money and got the money to do it, you could do it. Then doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter your religion. If they're all Christians, if they're all Muslims, if they're all Jews, it doesn't matter. You know, if they're all black, if they're all Hispanic, if they're all white, you know, it doesn't matter if they're all coming and they got the money and they're willing to pay you. If the juice is worth the squeeze to you, sell your house. If it's not, don't go anywhere. You know, nobody's forcing you to sell, right? These blockbusters, they're telling scary stories about how these people are going to damage and ruin your neighborhoods, and how they'll be your savior, that you could get out, but they're not going to pay you top dollar, you know, because all these people are moving in that are going to destroy your neighborhood, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and listen, when we say blockbusting and panic peddling, a lot of people automatically, their minds always went to race and color. It's always about race and color, but it's not only about race and color. Mm-hmm. Sure. That was the major discrimination. Yeah. But look, what about disability? Mm-hmm. You got a halfway house for recovering alcoholics or drug users, right? Go knocking on the door next door. Did you hear what they approved? So you're going to build that next door to you? You're going to have all these drug addicts with needles on the ground, and You know, they could tell you whatever scary story to try to get you to scare you into selling your house,
Mhm.
get you to sell it to them at a lower price because you'll be their savior to help get them out. And then you turn around and you sell the property at a marked up price because you know that's all BS to begin with, and they make money off of it. They're opportunists. That's all it is. They don't
Mhm.
they don't care about your race or color. They're just using that as the excuse to try to scare somebody. And if that don't work, they're gonna use some other kind of excuse. You know, it's illegal.
Start putting dead animals on your yard.
If you do that, I'm gonna be chasing you out there with a bat, you know?
Right.
Yeah. All right. So this is we're going to go over this as the last slide. We're past our time now, so we're going to go over this as the last slide, and then which is the highlights that we went over on the previous one, and then we'll call it a day. Okay. So the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 has prohibitions against these things. So the Civil Rights Act covers dwellings and apartments, as well as vacant land acquired for the construction of residential buildings, and it prohibits the following discriminatory acts. If you guys want, you could follow along in the book to see how my wording is different than the books. I slightly changed it because I gave a little bit more of a fuller explanation. So if you want to follow along while I read it to you. Refusing to sell, rent, or negotiate with any person or otherwise making a dwelling unavailable to any person as a means of discrimination. Changing terms, conditions, or services for different individuals as a means of discrimination. You know, yeah, changing the terms. Yeah, the price is this much for this person and it's this much for that person. You know, you can't have it. You can't be doing that. Practicing discrimination through any statements or advertisements that restrict the sale or rental of residential property. Representing to any person as a means of discrimination that a dwelling is not available for sale or rent, when in fact it is. Making a profit by inducing owners of housing to sell or rent because of the prospective entry of persons of a protected class into the neighborhood, because of their particular race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, or familial status. Those are the 7 protected classes under federal law.
You forgot sex.
No, I got sex in there.
You do? Oh, okay. Well, my book didn't. I had to write it in there. Okay.
No, your book didn't have it because 1968, that wasn't a protected class. They added that in 1974.
That's right.
But now it is. They amended it later on to include it. So my slide includes the most recent stuff.
Mm-hmm.
See, we're going to have another page. Well, later that was amended to also include this and this and this. So now you have everything that's disjointed. You know, they tell you what the law was, and then it was amended to add these things. I like to put them all together. Yeah, tell you, yeah, some of these things were not in the original law, and they were amended later. But we could have it all in one slide here now. Okay, so blockbusting, that's blockbusting and panic peddling. You're peddling your panic. You're selling that panic to try to scare them into selling their house. Or altering terms or conditions for a home loan or insurance policy to any person who wishes to purchase or repair a dwelling. Or otherwise deny such a loan as a means of discrimination, even though they can afford it. So it's basically discriminating by using the money, okay? Redlining is you're not giving somebody a loan or homeowner's insurance, even though they could afford it as a means of discrimination. So I like to say, think of an accountant when they're using red ink. Is that a good thing?
Mm-mm.
No, it usually means you want to stay out of the red. You want to stay in the blue or the black ink, right? You don't want to be in the red ink. Okay. Red is no good when it comes to finances. So think of redlining as dealing with the finances, even though that's not where the name comes from at all. Okay. I'll show you where the name actually comes from. It's actually from maps. We call them what do they call it? Residential security maps. I'll get into them. We'll get into them tomorrow. I'll show you where we actually get the term redlining from. I'll show you a little video about that. But Redlining deals with not giving somebody a home loan or insurance, even though they could afford it, as a means of discrimination. And then lastly, denying people membership or limiting their participation in any multiple listing service, real estate brokers organization, or other facility related to the sale or rental of dwellings as a means of discrimination. That's like me. I could join the African American Association of Realtors, the Asian Association, the Hispanic Association, Women's Council. If I was denied membership because I don't fit into that category, well,
Discrimination.
I'm protected under the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968. That's discrimination, right? Okay, so we'll leave it at this, and then we'll move on to why we got these. We'll dive into it. We'll go into the exceptions next, the exemptions or exceptions to the law next. So let's just stop off here. That was what slide did we end up on? That was
Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968,
12.
Chapter 4.
So let me get my little notes here. Okay, so let me throw out the, let me not waste your time here and throw up the end of stop.